And welcome back to sort of the Cooler Jets podcast for us, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Well, Michael, recording this directly after the Jets' first loss of the season, 30-10 to the Cowboys. It was always going to be an uphill climb. I did predict a win, though, so I guess I should own that. Maybe I was just trying to will it into existence. Short week, a lot of adversity, the reality of Rodgers' injury settling in, going on the road, facing one of the best teams in football, and the Jets were not able to overcome it. A lot of negatives in this one. Felt like they got thoroughly outcoached. Some positives, I did feel like Zach Wilson up until the end of the game there, about 90% of the game, I felt Zach Wilson had shown that he had made some strides. And then towards the end, when they're down 3 possessions trying to make something happen, you saw some of the old Zach Wilson come out. But all in all, a lot of negatives. So we're going to break it all down. Michael, you're pretty down. Can you walk us through kind of what's going through your head after this one?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's a really disheartening game just because of the overall team performance. I mean, we all knew this was going to be a tough game for them to win. I predicted them to lose in our preview podcast. They were 9.5 point underdogs. So this was always going to be a tough game on the road against a really good Cowboys team that is going to be in the mix until the very end. So always an uphill climb, but it is just disappointing that for most of this game, the major question that we had was answered. Zach Wilson was handling the pressure pretty well, making the throws he needed to make, and not imploding in the way that we expected that he possibly could, and protecting the ball to keep them in the game. For most of the game, he had that, but defensively, this was easily the worst defensive performance they've had, over the past 2 seasons since 22, and offensively. And again, we knew it was going to be a problem against this defensive line with Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, all the guys they have. But this was just catastrophic with the way the offensive line was protecting. So all around, just one of probably the worst performance overall they've had since the start of last year. So pretty disappointing to see the effort. Were you going to say there's a worse one?
Jaguars last year, I would say, was more disheartening.
The defense wasn't as bad.
Yeah,
they weren't good, but they weren't.
They
as bad.
literally couldn't throw the ball. So, I mean, I know what you mean. It's a disheartening performance, but there was a moment there at the end of the second quarter where they had a chance. They hit that nice touchdown to Garrett Wilson, and then they drop the pick six. Sauce drops the pick six. They get off the field on third down, and they get that bullshit roughing the passer, and then they get off the field again on third down, and they get a defensive holding, and I think the most concerning part of it, like you said, honestly, for me, is more the defense. The offense, we knew the Cowboys have one of the better defenses. They just, destroy the Giants 40-0. Micah Parsons has a real shot at winning MVP this year. Honestly, he just seems unblockable. I don't think that's a problem that will only be experienced by the Jets this season. But yeah, I mean, the defense is really where you're like, you wanted to see a little bit more fight. I think, they got off to a slow start. I feel like they made some adjustments. They stopped blitzing, which was really infuriating because if you go back to that Bills game, the only reason the Bills drove down the field at the end of regulation and got in position to tie it was the Jets started blitzing, and Allen was able to hit Diggs a few times and get in the field goal range, and they were able to tie it up. And then you come out in this Dallas game, and they got away from their 4-man rush early. I know they weren't necessarily getting the pressure that you would like to have seen, but you still got to trust that 4-man rush over the course of a game is going to win out over some of these blitz packages, which, I'm all for a well-timed blitz, but the Jets were running them way more frequently. I mean, you have to rewatch the film, but just on the initial watch, I felt like the Jets were blitzing a lot early and getting beat, get down early. And then I feel like they started to get into a groove a little bit, but then Michael Carter II goes out, and you could see that's just a big loss because he just takes a lot of space underneath. And the Cowboys were able to abuse them on those little short passes to the flat. Brandon Echols did not look too good. And this defense just had an uncharacteristically bad game. So I guess we'll start with them. We'll get into Zach Wilson, the offensive line, the rest of the offense, then looking forward. But let's just kind of talk defense here for a little bit. Do you agree with me that the game plan for this game was a little strange coming out with a lot of blitz packages early? Do you kind of agree with that strategy to try to get to Dak early, or do you think they should have trusted their 4-man rush early?
I was also confused about that because it wasn't working too well. It's usually not what the Jets do. And, it seemed like the Cowboys were prepared to counter that with quick throws and taking advantage of the space vacated by the blitzers. So that wasn't working out. But more disappointing than that plan was the fact that when they did rush with 4, it was embarrassingly bad. I mean, they weren't even getting close to Prescott. It looked like Zach Wilson's BYU pockets out there for a lot of the game. So we'll have to watch it and see, who wasn't winning, who was struggling. But yeah, the pass rush for the most part was just a non-factor, which is disappointing because that's the main thing that I think you point out with this defense,
Right.
and alongside the corners. But I think it's primarily the pass rush you look at and say, that's the engine of not only this defense but the entire team. And in this game, it was non-existent. So when you don't have your biggest advantage on your roster, it's hard to pull off upset wins on the road. And the Cowboys have a good offensive line, but Chuma Edoga was starting for them at guard today. So it's not like this is the, Cowboys lines of about a decade ago when it was that amazing unit, or it's not like this is the Eagles unit that they'll face in a few weeks. So there wasn't really an excuse to be that bad, but it was just non-existent pressure in this game. So we'll have to look more and see who's at fault for that.
I mean, just like you said, we got to go back and watch, but just off the initial watch, I believe they kept the running backs in a lot. They had their tight ends in chipping, and so they just had the numbers advantage. And then when they would go underneath, the Jets were missing an uncharacteristically high amount of tackles. I felt like that was something that really stuck out to me early, is that, okay, maybe they're not getting the same amount of pressure with their 4-man rush. I do think this is a good Dallas O-line. They scheme for it. They're ready for it. They also practice against a pretty damn good defensive line who runs a similar scheme all summer. So they were kind of ready for this. And Dak was getting the ball out of his hands quickly, going underneath. But then the Jets usually are able to swarm to the ball and secure the tackles. And today it didn't really seem like they were having the same success. I think that was where you really feel the difference, is because we've seen sometimes the Jets haven't been able to get pressure, but they have those other 7 guys back in coverage. You can go take those quick passes and get your 4 yards, but that's all you're going to get. And then today it was like, especially after Michael Carter II went out, just a lot of guys getting caught up in pick plays, missing tackles, easy first downs. I mean, the Jets got out coached on both sides of the ball. And we can come back to the defense, but just on the topic of coaching, it felt like there are a few things offensively that were frustrating. I guess from the start, there are 2 of them that really jump out to me, and 2 of them that you've been kind of hammering all off season. I don't know if it's going to make you feel any better to feel like you're right or whatever, but Dalvin Cook, obviously that brutal fumble, but that's not even more so. It's the running left right into the strength of the Cowboys defense with Micah Parsons, away from the strength of your offensive line with Mekhi Becton and Elijah Vera Tucker. And I know DeMarcus Lawrence is an incredible run defender, but I'd still rather run right with Becton and AVT on that side than running behind geriatric Dwayne Brown and free agents bust Laken Tomlinson. And then in the short yardage game, they kept going to Cook when it seems like, hey, I understand you want to have Breece Hall in a snap count, but that's more Breece Hall's game. Dalvin Cook isn't a guy who's, going to make somebody miss in the backfield all that often. He is the long speed. You want to get him involved as a pass catcher, but he's not your 3rd and 1 back. And it was infuriating to see the Jets, the amount of times that they were either running left or they're in short yardage situations running with Dalvin Cook. And then the last thing would be, can we get Jeremy Ruckert in there instead of CJ Uzama? I mean, I know that he's a fun player and he has green hair, and supposedly he has upside as a receiver, but all I see when that guy's out there, Michael, you've been texting me it for about a year. You used to be texting me CJ Uzama as a sneaky, terrible run blocker. I don't think it's sneaky anymore. Every highlight I saw, or every play I saw on Sunday, it just seemed like CJ Uzama was getting blown up. I'm not really sure what he has over Ruckert at this point. So a few things on both sides of the football. But let's talk about the offense. What do you kind of think about some of their decisions in the run game that seem to cost them?
Well, yeah, let's start with Uzama. I mean, I'll just put it out there. I'm sick of this guy. I'm completely sick of him. I mean, what does he do? What does he do? Tell me what he does.
He's supposed to be good at yak, I guess.
Oh, yeah, I've seen a lot of that this year. But no, I mean, he's awful as a run blocker. He's not subpar. He's not below average. He's terrible. And that was the case last year. It's still the case the first two games this year. And Ruckert is really good. It's not like he's promising. Like, he was dominating last week against Tre'Davious White, against those great Bills secondary players. But okay, let's keep playing Uzama for some reason.
The
And then
first
in
play of the
addition to
game they
that,
had him matched up with Micah Parsons.
yeah, and he gave up a 4-yard run stuff that killed the drive. So, and I'm sure there were more on top. I know there were more on top of that. I remember seeing them. And then in addition to that, why is this guy lining up out wide? Why? Why are we putting a 6'6" tight end who has the least quickness of any player, offensive skill player on the team, who can't run routes? Why is he out wide? What does he do? He does absolutely nothing. And McCole Hardman is sitting on the bench doing nothing. I don't get it. That makes no sense to me. So I would like to see more of Hardman. He played one snap at the end of the game and got more yards than Uzama has in his past 20 games. So, I mean, I just don't understand that at all. Why Uzama is lining up out wide and Hardman's on the bench. But anyway, Dalvin Cook. I mean, again, like I was saying it the whole offseason leading up. Like I wasn't gonna take any victory laps or anything, and I don't want to. Like I wish he played great, but I I said the whole offseason this was gonna happen. He's gonna have a big fumble in a big spot, and so far we haven't seen anything to make up for that. I mean, you get what 1.8 yards per carry, so that's pretty cool. Um, so yeah, I mean, I know they're working Brees back slowly, which makes sense and it's fair. You know, I totally understand that, but I mean, Dalvin Cook is just not it right now. And I know the offensive line wasn't good in this game, but when he carries the ball, like, where's the juice? I don't see it. I don't see power at the end of the run. I don't see tackle breaking. I don't see breakaway speed. Just he takes the ball and he gets what's there. That's it. Anybody in the league can do that.
You got a lot of
And
hate for that, for saying that Zonovan Knight could do that, but Zonovan Knight's no longer on this team. But there's a part of me that's like, I'd rather see Abanikanda out there.
yeah,
You know,
100%. I mean, yeah, I wish it didn't happen this early, and that and hopefully it doesn't happen again. But
yeah, it wasn't like Hall was
it,
much better, I guess. I mean, he did make guys miss, but I
right,
think he had like 9 yards or something on 4 carries.
right, it was easy to see this coming. So I mean, hopefully he hits some home runs, starts to play better. Because he was coming off of surgery as well, and late joining the team and all that. So hopefully he could get it together, acclimate, recover, and play better. I 100% want to see it. But like the warning signs for this were there. They were right there in the open, but everyone chose to ignore that and look at the name. And now here we are. So hopefully it gets better. But yeah, with the offensive line, I mean, Dwayne Brown, I get that it's Micah Parsons and he's amazing. Like you said, could win MVP this year with the way that he affects the game in so many different ways. But like he didn't look like he belonged out there. I mean, it was effortless for Micah Parsons, totally effortless. 2 steps he had to win. Just jab outside, swim move inside every single time. 0 effort. So I guess you give, Dwayne a little bit more time to, show that he deserves to continue starting because they trusted him and all that. But the leash is already pretty short after a performance like that because that was completely unacceptable, regardless of who you're facing. I'm curious to see what the numbers turn out to be, but he probably gave up at least 10 pressures in this game, at least 5 stuffs in the run game, just abominable stuff. So we'll see. I mean, next week you get Judon, so who's probably not Micah Parsons, but still one of the best in the league. So you give him a little bit more time, but I don't think the leash can be too long before you go and decide that, all right, we got to switch this up because that was just not it. And you can't move the football with your left tackle playing that way. In addition to that, I mean, every offensive lineman was bad, but McGovern struggled. Thompson, I think AVT, it seemed like he was giving up a lot of pressures.
Yeah.
Becton had that huge pressure at the end of the first half where the Jets could have had a touchdown, probably would have. But Zach got his hand hit and couldn't get that ball to Garrett Wilson. So, yeah, offensive line play needs to improve. So, yeah, I mean, not not a lot to feel good about in this game besides Zach Wilson, I guess, for 3/4 of the game, which we can talk about.
I was looking at the game log just while you were talking. They had 2 runs to the right, each for 6 yards, one with Dalvin Cook and one with Brees Hall. And like I get it, it's not as simple. And also they got down, so they didn't run as often in the second half. But Brees Hall is I mean, I guess I'll say he's your second best player. I guess I'll put Garrett Wilson a tick above him. But Brees Hall is your second best player. How many carries did he have? 4 carries? I should double check that.
So. Yeah, I have to
4 carries. This is a game where we said, like, trust the defense and the run game. Obviously, the defense didn't hold up there into the bargain. And like you said, I actually felt like Zach Wilson did a lot
Yeah,
of
I give
good
him
in this
4.
game. But you give him Brees Hall 4 carries and 3 of them to the left. It's like run behind your big boys up front and Becton, AVT. You have Ruckert. You can put him out there, and good things are going to happen. But instead, we're getting too much Dalvin Cook. We're running to the left behind Dwayne Brown, and it's easy for us to criticize. But it does seem pretty simple that if you run right, good things will happen. So we'll see. We'll see how things change. Next week, as I said, is the big game. The rushing attack was really disappointing for me in this one, but I know Dallas has that great defense, and Parsons and Lawrence really, just dominated the trenches today. But yeah, like you said, Zach Wilson, a lot of good for the majority of the game. Honestly, even up to his last interception, the first 2 interceptions he threw, I kind of felt like, all right, well, they're down in the fourth quarter. He's trying to make something happen. I have to rewatch the first interception to see exactly what happened. But, this is last week, Josh Allen, who had a terrible game, so it's not really a great excuse, but he turned the ball over 4 times. Zach Wilson might throw a few interceptions. It's okay. So that first interception, we got to go back and watch, but I wasn't too discouraged by it when I watched it. The second one, same thing. It's like, all right, he had the touchdown. You kind of let the ball float up there a little bit too long, but you're down. I think they were already down 20 at that point. I don't hate it. The last interception, though, that he threw, that's the one where you're like, oh, God, there he is. There's the Zach Wilson that we saw in 2021 and 2022. So I felt like we did see some strides from Zach. I felt like his footwork was calmer. His accuracy was better. He was stepping up in the pocket. I like to see him use his legs. And that drive before halftime, he really did. And like you said, he was robbed of that touchdown to Garrett Wilson that he would have had. The touchdown he did have to Garrett Wilson was an absolute dot over the middle, man coverage. I think we saw more confidence from Zach Wilson. We saw a lot of good from him. He turned into a pumpkin at the end of the game. But we're expecting like, okay, if the Jets are going to do anything this season, they got to be great defensively. They got to be able to run the ball, and Zach Wilson's got to be a game manager. And they asked him to be more than that today. So it's hard for me to pin this loss entirely on him. That's the easy thing to do. And, by the end of it, I wouldn't say that he had a good game just because of that fourth quarter. But after 3 quarters, I think you even texted me. You said, hey, Zach Wilson, at the very least, you feel a lot better about the Jets' chances this season because he looks like he's at least going to give you a chance. He doesn't look like he's imploding or that they can't move the ball at all. He made some really nice throws in there. And I think when you go back and watch the all-22, there's going to be a lot to like. But that interception at the end can't happen. And some of the other plays, that he made, I'm trying to think of off the top of my head. He had a few other misses. He did also have that ridiculous throw to Lazard that was called back, that was a penalty and they said was incomplete. He had a few other nice throws where he, stepped up in the pocket, rolled out. I really liked the way he used his legs. So yeah, I don't know, Michael, anything else? I mean, what did you make of Zach Wilson's performance?
Yeah, I mean, for 3.5 quarters, and at least let's say when the game was actually in doubt, like Zach Wilson was the least of the Jets' problems in this game, which is, if you told us going in that would happen, you'd feel pretty confident the Jets would win the game, or at least be competitive in it. But yeah, I mean, the pressure was insurmountable at many junctures of this game, and the way he handled it is about as well as I've ever seen it. I mean, we saw a lot of stepping up in the pocket instead of going backwards, a lot of standing, still in the pocket when he could anticipate that the pressure was going to get behind him and he didn't need to move. We saw him use his legs when it was correct. I think his accuracy for the most part was pretty good. And, people look at the box score, 12 for 27, whatever. But, how many throwaways and batted passes and stuff are in there? Like, he threw the ball pretty well. And there were some really good throws in there at times. Like the touchdown to Garrett was, perfect stride to facilitate him to have the chance to make that play. The deep throw he threw to Lazard at the end of the game, which was incomplete, and there was a penalty on it, but that was an amazing throw. The back shoulder he had to Garrett after that. So when he had a chance, he was really good in this game. And then when he was pressured, I think he handled it really well. And just watching him, play to play, even if it wasn't the greatest result, like I feel like he was making the right decisions, getting the ball out quick. It felt like, he's hitting the depth of his drop and finding his read pretty quickly. So, I mean, he did look changed in this game compared to what we're used to. And we saw some signs of that last week, and I do feel like he built on that in this game for the most part. But obviously, the end of the game, I wish it didn't play out that way because it really puts a stain on it. You look at the box score, 3 interceptions, 38 passer rating, all this negative stuff, and hopefully it doesn't kill his confidence too much because, look, you can say what you want about each interception, but, the Jets were down 3 scores at that point. He had no chance to do anything all day, and this is the first time he kind of did get a chance to do something because the defense was just backing off and playing safe at that point. So he's just playing backyard football, chucking it around. And that doesn't necessarily excuse those plays. There's something you could pick with each one of them. I think especially the third one is probably the worst. But the first one, I mean, classic, I think, with Zach Wilson scramble drill, maybe trying to force it a little bit. The second one, maybe he floated it a little bit too long. We'll have to take another look at it. But, maybe it would be a good throw if that defender wasn't there, but it seemed like maybe he could have zipped that one in a little quicker. Then the last one was just bad. But yeah, I mean, before it got into like, we're down 3 scores, let's just chuck the ball around and make plays. Like, I thought he did a really nice job hanging in there and he did what we wanted him to do to give the Jets a chance to win this game. But unfortunately, you get 1 sack on defense, you get 0 takeaways. What was their third down in this? I'm pulling it up right now. Defensively on third down, they allowed 9 for 18. So you're not going to win a lot, giving them 9 third down conversions in a game. So yeah, the defense can never make those big plays that Zach Wilson put them in position to make by not turning the ball over, by playing it safe, by saying, "Hey, you guys go win this game for us. I'm not going to lose it for you." He didn't do that, but the defense couldn't capitalize. So, I mean, I come away encouraged with Zach Wilson after this game, despite what the stats might say, the scoreboard, and those interceptions at the end. I feel like he did his part in this game. He did what we wanted him to do. And if he could play this way against New England that next week and even build on it, I think they have a good chance to come out with the win.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we're grading him on a curve these days. We're not grading him as the number 2 overall draft pick. We're grading him as, can this guy, if everything else around him is going well, is he going to sink the ship? Can he game manage? Can he beat 2009, 2010 Sanchez? And I think he showed you today that he can do that. I think he's made enough strides where you feel like, okay, this guy at least looks like an NFL quarterback. That last interception, maybe not as much, but I think he's going to walk out of this, and I think his confidence is actually going to increase from this game. Like you said, I wish the game didn't turn into it how it looked at the end, but I do think that there's enough big-time NFL throws and plays and having to find some sort of completion and all that chaos with Parsons and Lawrence in the backfield. I think there's a lot to like from him in this game. And, yeah, I mean, this was never the plan. I think that's the other thing is grading him on the curve of also he's going into Dallas on the road, home opener for Dallas, biggest stadium in the NFL. All eyes around the NFL are on him. This is a 425. It's essentially a bit of a primetime game. Coming off of the week of losing Aaron Rodgers, that reality setting in, all the discussion all week has been about him. It's a lot of pressure on this guy. And I think he went out there and handled it admirably. Like, look, was he unbelievable? No. I think before the end, like you said, I would actually said Zach Wilson had a good game. I think throwing 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter kind of changed his good to fine, but he's not the reason they lost this game. He's out of the oven a little early. You wanted to see him get that season with Rodgers, and I think you can be encouraged by some of the development you've just seen from the offseason with Rodgers. I wish that he could have had more time in the oven, but I think I saw enough today to say, okay, if everything goes well, if the Jets defense that we have seen the last 2 years shows up and the Jets running game is able to get going, this guy's not going to lose him as many games. But the defense didn't show up, the running game didn't show up, and that's, they put too much on his shoulders and he wasn't able to overcome it. I guess we'll stay with the offense. We can go back to defense and get out of here. What did you make of kind of their usage of, you kind of mentioned Hardman. Well, I think he had 1 catch in this game, didn't really get too much run. What did you kind of make of their usage of Hardman, and Randall Cobb is still in there, and just kind of the way that they're using their receivers so far, and I guess this Hackett offense as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I think they could optimize the run game by taking some of those Uzama snaps. For me, I would take all of them, but I'll be realistic and fair. Take some of them and give them to Jeremy Ruckert. I think that's an easy way to make the run game better. And then I don't get why McCole Hardman isn't playing more. I mean, I would get it if you had Corey Davis still, and someone who deserves to have those snaps. But if we're wasting our time with CJ Uzama running routes on the outside, what are we even doing? So I don't really understand why Hardman isn't playing more when like they're just putting tight ends out there running wide anyway. So definitely would like to see some more Hardman, and just involving him in like pre-snap motion and some of the gadget play stuff. Just get the ball in his hands. The offense could really use that spark. So would like to see some more Hardman, and hopefully in terms of the backfield, we can see some more higher percentage for Brees as the season goes on, because I mean he's clearly so far ahead of Dalvin Cook, and I get that you're trying to work him back in slowly, but you also want to win games. So in terms of the snaps in this game, it looks like they were closer in this one. Um, Brees' snaps didn't actually go up. He was at 33%, but Cook was down to 35. So they were about the same. He had one more snap than Hall did, 16 to 15. And then Carter actually played 15 snaps, so he was way up compared to the last game, which I wouldn't mind him taking some of Cook's snaps, honestly. So we'll see how that plays out, but hopefully Brees can work his way to the point where he's the bell cow, because he really deserves. Like, there isn't any situation where I would take either of those guys over Brees Hall, and that's not to say give him every single snap, because really no team in the league does that anymore, and you want to keep your backs fresh, especially a guy who's recovering. But he's just so good and talented all around, to where you want him out there as much as possible. And anytime he's not out there, your team is just worse, because Carter and Cook just are not as good as him. So hopefully that can progress nicely as the season goes on.
Is it just me, or is Sauce having a bit of a sophomore slump? And granted, this guy has
Yes.
been so good that I think the bar is so high that it's a little unfair to say that this guy isn't performing at the same level, because it's a pretty hard. I mean, corner play, as you know, is very up and down year to year. It's hard to have consistent corner play, and I still think he's been good. He did force the fumble, should have had the pick six, but it feels like he's missing a few more tackles. Feels like he's just kind of caught in between zones a few times in this game. Feels like he got cooked a little bit. I mean, not like to the level of Tremaine Johnson or anything close. He's still getting good cornerback play from him, but I think we were getting like elite level, best cornerback in football play last year, and then through 2 games so far, we've gotten fine to good cornerback play. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. He hasn't been bad, and people will say he's been bad just because, like you said, the standard is so high that in comparison to that, it feels like a massive fall off. But he's just been okay. I mean, he's missed some tackles in both games now. The interception opportunity in this game, still give him credit for a great break on the ball and breaking it up, but it's definitely one you got to have. And just overall, he's been getting beat a little more consistently than he did last year. And granted, tough start to the season with Stephon Diggs and CeeDee Lamb, but I mean, overall, he still hasn't been bad. Like, we know what bad cornerback play looks like.
Yeah.
We watched so many years of, like, a corner would have a game where he gives up 2 touchdowns, 100 yards, 8-7 catches. For Sauce, first couple games, I mean, we'll see what the numbers are in this game, but what did he give up? Like 2 or 3 first downs last week. This game, probably another 3 or so. But it's not like he's giving up huge touchdown bombs over the top
Right.
or anything.
That's
And the one
actually where he's at
touchdown
his
that was
best.
near him, yeah. So
The deep
and
ball.
the one touchdown that was near him with the tight end, I mean,
He
Robbie
stumbled.
had a really good tweet on it. Like, it was kind of just a really good play call and just a good job of the tight end and the quarterback being on the
He
same
did
page,
stumble,
sitting
though.
in the right spot. Maybe he could have stopped it, but it's kind of more of just beating the zone coverage than him getting beat one-on-one. So he's been okay. He hasn't been terrible, but it is only 2 games, so you have plenty of time to turn that into a really good season. Like he had some okay games last year, but just overall body of work was great because we saw all 17 games. Right now, we're only 2 games in, so still plenty of time for him to turn this into a similarly great season. But yeah, not the greatest start.
Yeah, teams are attacking the Jets underneath, and that's really, I mean, we'll see about Quincy Williams and Michael Carter II, their status for next week, because you already know Bill Belichick watched that game and had a lot of notes about how to attack these Jets in the flats. And those 2 guys, Williams and Carter, are probably their biggest difference makers in those areas. So Yeah, I mean, I guess last thing, what are some changes you would make ahead of Sunday? I mean, I guess we touched on a few of them, but I don't think we're at the point yet where we're putting Titman in for Lakin or we're moving AVT to tackle. Is there anything? I mean, is there anything that you would make in the immediate future? Or is there anything you're keeping your eye on for future weeks?
I mean, obviously we mentioned a bunch of things already, but in terms of what would we do immediately, I mean, I think in terms of offensive line, you'd probably give that at least one more game, just because Zach's first start on the road, amazing Cowboys defensive line. Fine, we'll give you another game. So I would give them at least one more game before making changes, but I don't think it's hard to start out and just say, hey, let's put McCole Hardman out there out wide instead of CJ Uzama. Like, let's use our brains a little bit. Can we do that? That one just frustrates me so much. I'm sorry. Because every time I see Uzama lined up out wide, I'm like, what is he going to do? Like, he can't do anything in that position. So, like, I mean, there are things he can do as a pass catcher. Like, you can have him run a crosser and get him some yak opportunities. Or, you could call a surprise screen every once in a while and get him that. But out wide, like, he's not running by you. He's not going to win a jump ball because you've never seen him do that. He's not quick enough to beat you inside. It's like he's just standing there. You could just plant a tree out there and it would do the same exact thing. So let's get Hardman some more snaps. Let's get Uzama off the field.
I think it's a pretty good place to start. I guess the other one, there was a lot of uproar before the game about Will McDonald being inactive. Do you think there's any chance, we have to go back and watch the film on this one and see how the front four was doing. But if they're struggling to get pressure, maybe a guy like McDonald and his lethal spin move. I mean, yes, he's a young player. Maybe he's not as good against the run, but we know damn well that he can walk in day one and be a pretty solid pass rusher. So do you think McDonald should be activated? Anything on the defensive side of the ball?
Yes, I think after this game, you have to activate McDonald at least next week, and we'll see how it goes week by week. But he's too good of a pass rusher in a league that revolves around pass rushing for him to be inactive. And I look at Michael Clemens. I know he's a great run defender on the edge and brings the intimidation and all that, but he does nothing as a pass rusher. He doesn't do anything. That's a fact. So
I look at somebody else on that line.
Okay.
I have to rewatch it. Didn't feel like Carl Lawson did anything in this game. I have to rewatch. He's kind of one of those guys that sneakily.
I forgot he was playing. So
yeah, he is one of those guys that kind of sneakily adds up a lot of pressures. So I should rewatch.
I don't even know if he had those in this game, but yeah, you're right. We gotta watch. But like, I don't like. I feel like I have a good eye for that. Like, okay, here's a pressure. Like, I think Huff had some pressures. Yeah, he did his thing, and maybe Quinnen wasn't quite as dominant as I expected. Again, have to watch it. Maybe he had pressures that weren't capitalized on, but and they were double teaming him probably. Yeah, other than Huff getting some pressures, I don't remember seeing much of anything. And JJ's not quite making that leap yet. I mean, he has some good hustle plays for sure. Like we know what he does, but in terms of winning as a pass rusher consistently, I haven't quite seen it yet. But yeah, like McDonald's too talented, I think, to be inactive. And I get that it's a numbers game and everything, but like if I'm going to take the pass rusher or the run defender, I'm going to lean towards the pass rush, even if it's overloading on pass rush, because it's just so important. And in this game, we saw that, as good as we think this Jets pass rush is, they got completely dominated today. So it's not the all-world unit we thought it was. So it could use all the help it can get. So I mean, there should be a way to just make sure that McDonald and Clemens can play, because Clemens' run defense is really valuable. I think you do want him out there. And even on special teams, he's a really good player, as we've seen. So I want him out there. It's just, you have to find a way to get your first-round pass rusher on the field, who I think showed in the preseason and with some of his reps last week that he has some juice and he can help you right now, especially after this game. And now you know that you're not this super powered pass rush that's just going to automatically win every single week.
Yeah, it's the story of Saleh's defense, I would say, is that when the Jets defensive line is better than the offensive line they're going up against, they're going to have a lot of success. And today, I don't know if I would have thought on paper this Jets defensive line was better than this Cowboys offensive line, but Cowboys have a great offensive line. They game planned well for this defensive line, and they were up for the task, whereas this D-line was not. And because of that, you kind of saw the defense fall apart. I do think the defense deserves some credit for holding in the red zone as strong as they did. I have to go back and tally it up, but it feels like they were pretty stiff in the red zone. They just allowed too many of those big plays that they don't normally allow, too many downfield throws of 15, 20, 25 yards that feels like maybe they'll give up one or maybe two of those a game, but they've been pretty consistent on not allowing the big plays. Maybe a team can drive down the field with dinking and dunking, but the Jets are going to get their sacks. They'll create a turnover, and at worst, they'll hold for 3. It feels like the Jets were kind of out of their element from the start of the game on this one. I guess that'll do it for us. I'll do the plugs, and Michael, if you have anything else, just shout it out towards the end. But you can follow us at 2AJ Pod on Twitter. Michael _Nania, myself, Ben W. Blessington. Go to jetsxfactor.com, best place to go for Jets content. Please, if you can't, subscribe, rate, review to the iTunes, and subscribe to the Jets X Factor YouTube. Michael, last thoughts.
I mean, why is CJ Uzama lining up outside? All right, I'll stop with my CJ. I think I've said my piece.
I mean, look,
on that.
It shows you how big last week was. The fact that they got that win last week and they're not looking at 0-2. They've bought themselves. I mean, this game against the Patriots is absolutely massive, especially for Zach Wilson's confidence. And if they can win that, they're 2-1 going into Sunday Night Football against the Chiefs. You feel pretty good about it. And I even said to you, Michael, I felt like this matchup against the Cowboys was actually the hardest matchup they had in these first few games. The Eagles might have something to say about that, but I feel like this Cowboys defense, just with Micah Parsons, looks incredible. The Eagles are great in the trenches, and they'll be a tough matchup, and I don't think I'll be predicting a win for that game. But, hey, look, Kirk Cousins dropped 4, should have been 5 touchdowns on them. They moved the ball. They look a little bit more beatable. They're at home, whatever. Cowboys are the hardest matchup. Patriots, I said, was third, and out of all of them, is probably the most important. Division game, AFC game, opportunity to go to 2-1 in the season, which is absolutely huge. Zach Wilson getting the chance to exercise some demons. And this team, it's not just Zach Wilson. This team hasn't beaten the Patriots. When was the last time the Jets beat the Patriots? Jeez.
2015 game, the overtime.
Jesus. My God. So, yeah, it's not just Zach Wilson. It's this entire team. So next week at home, if you're going, be loud. We'll have a podcast on Friday previewing it. But that game is absolutely massive. And just the fact that they won week 1, I'm not preparing for the loss, but even if you lost the Patriots and you're 1-2, you somehow sneak out a win against the Chiefs, which I know sounds crazy, but actually their defense is the easiest of the 4 defenses they've played up to that point. Then you're back to 500. It just shows you like how that week 1 game really buys you a whole month of football. It kind of feels like, whereas if you lose it and then you lose week 2, it kind of feels like your back's against the wall. You're not going anywhere. It's like the 2018 with Favre started 1-2. Last year, the Jets started 1-2. So, not saying I'm preparing for it. I'm just saying that week 1 was an absolutely massive W for this team. And next week is about as big as it gets, though. Opportunity to go to 2-1, exercise those Patriots demons at home, solve as much as this tape is going to show Belichick how to attack this Jets defense. I think it's some good teach tape for the Jets. It feels like they had a lot of mental errors. It kind of feels like they shot themselves in the foot a few times on defense. So a lot to learn from this game. But we'll learn a lot more next Sunday. So with that said, Michael, I know you gave your last thoughts on CJ Uzama, but anything else before we get out of here?
I think that's a great point because, imagine if they lose that game and we're sitting here right now at 0-2. It would be, as bad as this feels, it would be a lot worse. But because you win that game, it gives you that buffer to where you could feel like, all right, we're in this thing. We can lose some games and still bounce back and be in the picture here. So terrible game here, but next week is a new day, another chance to progress this team and continue to push for Aaron Rodgers' comeback in the wild card round.
All right, last question. Would you have rather had this is going to piss people off, but would you rather have today's loss with the way that Zach Wilson looked, or a win where Zach Wilson looks like he did against Denver last year?
I'd probably take the win and just hope that the Jets could, see the light and understand, like, okay, let's go get a quarterback. So, but because
bottom out and then
it wasn't like he balled out today. Like, it was promising. But if they lost like 40-38 and he was like dominating, then maybe I'd take the loss. But with this case, I'd take
without the interceptions. I felt at a certain point there was a point in this game where I was like, this might go down as Zach Wilson's best game of his career.
The
And
drive
then
at the end of the second quarter was his best drive for sure.
when he used his legs, and we kind of said that. We said that in the
Yeah.
preview. He's got to use his legs. He's one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the league. I watched Desmond Ritter run it 10 times in a game. I'm like, Zach Wilson's a better athlete than Desmond Ritter. Not that you want him taking all those shots, but he's an athlete. He's got to use his legs more. I mean, just move the chains, keep him in second and third and short if he runs. So yeah, I'm glad we got to see that. You know, the fourth quarter interceptions down three possessions suck, but I think the first 3 quarters give you enough to feel confident. Like, okay, I do feel like this defense will bounce back. The Patriots offense doesn't scare me. I feel confident enough where I'm like, all right, maybe they have enough to squeak out those 9-ish wins that they need, and then Rodgers can come back with his bridge brace or whatever. I'm not buying that until we see it. But anyways, we'll be back on Friday previewing the Patriots game. Absolutely huge game. But for now, take a break from the Jets after listening to this podcast, of course. Take a break from the Jets. Protect your mental health a little bit because that was a tough game. Michael's going to go sit in a dark room. Michael's going to do his own darkness retreat for the next 3 days. But we'll be back on Friday previewing the Patriots game. Thank you everybody for listening. Have a great week. Go Jets.